What's up YouTube? Welcome to my channel. My name is Andrea Tillerman and I am a certified personal trainer as well as a registered physical therapy assistant, and I have a specialization in corrective exercise by NASM. Today I'm going to be talking about how to deadlift, especially if you're a beginner, like the basic movements that you need to know so that you guys can get started with your hip hinging and your deadlifting pattern. So let's get into the video. So the first thing that's really important to note is that a deadlift is what we call a hip hinging pattern, meaning that you're moving mainly from the hips as opposed to in a squat pattern, you're moving at the hips, but you're also bending your knees in the movement. So a squat is a vertical movement where you're moving up and down, and a deadlift is a pattern where you're moving from the hips and you're moving front to back. So essentially the basic movement pattern is different. Sometimes they look pretty similar, but it is different. So keep an eye out and I'll show you in this video. So shift your hips backwards. Think of shifting them behind your heels and forward to come up to stand. Hold your ribs down to the top of your pelvis while you shift your hips back and up, and then push forward to stand. You can see that as I sit back, I'm not really bending my knees. So your knees are staying pretty vertical in line with your ankle. And once again, I'm going to shift my hips backward and push everything forward to stand. You don't want to sit into a squat position. So first, what's important is to find a neutral spine, just meaning that you're not overarching in your back and you're not overly rounded in your shoulders or posterior pelvic tilting. Here I have my butt sticking out and my rib cage flaring open. You want to kind of close that gap between the bottom of your rib cage and the top of your hip bones. So draw your belly button up and in, and that's going to reduce that arch in your low back. You're not just dumping your shoulders forward to get that action. You're thinking of drawing your rib cage down to meet the top of your hip bones. So now as you hinge backwards, your spine stays straight and you don't break that straight spine. So a really great tool that you guys can use to help keep your spine stable as you're moving up and down is grabbing some sort of a dowel or like a PVC pipe I've grabbed here and placing it behind your back. You want to place it so that it's coming into contact with the back of your skull, right in between your shoulder blades and somewhere at the top of your sacrum or like the buttocks. So you can see here that I have all three of those contact points in line with the dowel. So I'm going to hinge over without losing those contact points. So I move my hips back and push forward to stand. You can see that my spine stays in one straight line and there are no gaps between myself and the dowel. If you have difficulties maintaining contact with that pole, it's most likely due to you kind of breaking that nice plank board position in your spine and either overarching somewhere or like over rounding somewhere in your spine. In most cases, it tends to be overarching in your low back. So only hinge as far back as you can maintain contact with all three of those points with that PVC pipe. That's going to give you really great external feedback to practice kind of that stable spine. Hey guys, so as I'm editing, I just wanted to clarify what I was talking about with the different contact points on the pole. I wanted to make sure that you guys are aware that we do have natural curvatures to our spine, and I'm not trying to say that you should minimize or exaggerate either or. So in our cervical spine, we have a natural curve, like an indentation of the spine, and we also have that at our lumbar spine. At our thoracic spine, we have a natural curvature outward. So I'm not saying that your lumbar spine should be completely flat against the pole, nor should your cervical spine be completely flat against the pole. That's why I mentioned those three contact points at the back of the skull, in between the shoulder blades, and at the sacrum, because those are points that are going to remain the same throughout and you are not physically overarching or over rounding your spine to get the contact to the pole. So don't move, at your lumbar spine or your cervical spine. I wanted to clarify that you do have those natural curves in your spine and you are not trying to force them in one direction or another necessarily. Another really nice drill to practice that hinging pattern without getting too much bend in your knees is to walk up against a low bench so that your calves are actually touching the bench, and then shifting your butt back behind you and standing back up. So that bench is preventing you from falling over, which you might feel like you're about to do initially in that hip hinging pattern as your weight kind of shifts back to your heels or even beyond your heels. So it's really nice as a good external cue is to keep your knees soft. Don't bend from the knees any further than that knee soft position, and practice pushing your hips back but up at the same time. So you don't want to push your hips back and down like in a squat. You want to push them back and up. And from that back and up angle, your torso is naturally gonna come forward. So you can think of it as a seesaw, right? So as one side of our seesaw comes up, the other side drops down. But the seesaw is one stiff plank, right? It doesn't shift and then break in the middle and then come back down, or it doesn't overarch as it moves up and down. But once you've mastered that hip hinge pattern itself, just body weight, then you can practice the movement with a kettlebell. So I like to progress to the kettlebell first because it mimics the pattern really well, and it's not using too much of a load yet. It just gives you enough so that you can practice the movement and have some sort of external load to make the exercise a little bit heavier and work your way up to the next progression, which would be a hex bar deadlift or a barbell deadlift. So I'll actually make a separate video for the hex bar and the barbell deadlifts. I just want you guys to get comfortable with this movement pattern first and to practice with the kettlebell itself. So you're gonna grab a kettlebell, make sure that the handlebar of the kettlebell is horizontal, not vertical. You're gonna step up to the kettlebell so that the middle part of your foot is directly in line with the handlebar itself. You're gonna slide your hands down your thighs. So practice that hinge. Always start from that standing position and practice the hinge movement. Slide your hands down your thighs. Once you physically can't bend your hips back any further, that's where you can maybe start to bend your knees until your hands just reach that handlebar. So then you can think of pulling that handlebar in half like it's a stick. So you physically just break that handlebar in half. That's gonna get that external rotation at the shoulder. You can also think of getting that external rotation from if you held a pencil at the back of your armpit and you're squeezing that pencil into your back. That's gonna get that shoulder external rotation, which helps with stability in the movement, and it also helps keep the path of our load, which in this case is our kettlebell, it keeps that path relatively up and down. If you don't keep your armpits squeezed into your back, then the kettlebell, in this instance, might move forward as you're standing up. So whenever you're pulling the kettlebell up and down, you want the path to be a pretty vertical path as you lift. If you don't keep those lats engaged and you let the kettlebell drift forward and then you place it back on your thighs at the top of the movement, the path changes and it places a little bit more load on that lumbar spine, which we don't want to do in this movement pattern. We're working our spinal erectors in an isometric fashion, which just means that in this movement that they are being held against resistance, but you want the main driver of this movement to be for the hamstrings and the glutes. Another thing to keep in mind as you're hinging down is to drive your knees out to the sides of the room. So you just don't want your knees to cave in towards one another or your kneecaps to point in at one another as you are performing the movement pattern. So as you are hinging over, make sure that you feel like you're pressing your thighs out to the sides of the room. That's going to give you really good tension in your legs, as well as better hip stabilization and preventing that knee caving in, which is just a compensation that a lot of people have. All right, so we're going to put everything together again, and I'm going to show you guys the movement one more time. So make sure that you're stepping up to your kettlebell with the inner arch of your foot directly to the side of the handlebars. So let's smack center in your feet. You're going to start from a standing position, find your neutral spine, maintain that rib down position. That's going to help prevent your spine from extending or rounding while you're performing the movement itself. Squeeze your tummy tight. So physically draw your belly button into your back. That's going to give you that extra core stability that we're looking for. Then you're going to hinge your hips back, keep your knees soft, sit your butt back and up, back and up, back and up. And then if you're still not able to reach the handle of the kettlebell, that's where you can start to bend your knees a little bit more until you just reach the handlebar. Grab your hands around that handlebar, and as if you had a pencil at the back of your armpit, you're gonna squeeze that pencil. Keep that back super tight, and then from there, you're gonna push the floor away from you to come up to that standing position. So don't just lead with the back. You don't wanna lift with the back itself. You want to push the floor away from you so that the movement is initiating from the legs. The whole point of this exercise is to get the hamstrings and the glutes nice and strong. So we want to make sure that we're initiating the pattern from our legs. At the top of your position, you're gonna squeeze your butt cheeks together. And I don't mean to push your hips forward in front of your shoulders. Just come to a neutral standing position, but give a good butt squeeze. Over time, as you get better and better at figuring out what neutral is and getting better hamstring and glute engagement, then you can get a little bit more power from the hamstrings and glutes itself and feel that power drive you up to that standing position. And that's the point. That's part of the point of the butt squeeze itself, is to feel that glute drive. But it's not to just push our hips forward and hinge in that lumbar spine. All right. So I hope those tips are helpful for you beginners trying to learn to deadlift out there. If you guys decide to add in the kettlebell deadlift into your programming, I would perform this movement maybe 2 times a week, anywhere from 4 weeks to 6 weeks. And if you're a beginner, I would start out with a repetition range of 10 to 12. Once you are really comfortable with the movement, as your weeks are progressing, make sure that you are either increasing the repetitions that you're performing or start switching out your kettlebells for a slightly heavier kettlebell. Beyond that, once you are lifting close to 40, 45 pounds from a kettlebell, that is a great time to switch over to a barbell deadlift or a hex bar deadlift. So stay tuned, because I'm gonna have some upcoming videos for you guys explaining those 2 exercises so you can continue building strength. Give me a thumbs up if you've liked this video and you found it helpful, and reach out if you have any comments or questions, and I'll see you in another video. Bye.